Thanks for joining us for Political Talk on another PolitiPod Live. Tonight we'll cover This Week in Failure, Tuck Tail and Run, Election Central, and Reason to Hope. We'll also have our segments Fascism Creeps and Issue Update. I'm Tom Bickle.
I'm Hannah Soldner.
And I'm Matt Nisanoff. We start with This Week in Failure. We can, of course, mention what's going on with the with Iran and how much longer we can tolerate a kink in the straits, so to speak. So the Iran war has gone horribly for the U.S., and despite the statements of certain administration officials who have said 30 or 40 times that the war was ending, and how well it's going, and how we won, and how there was an unconditional surrender, and how there was, etc., etc. The reality is, even the lie about how there's the end of it already. The agreement or memorandum that was signed promised Iran all of the things. They won all the things because they won the war. You see how that goes? And so they're being given $300 billion. And after it was pointed out that was, golly gee, that's a lot of money. Then the White House said, "Oh, okay, well, we'll start giving it to them now. We're gonna give them the money as a reward as they achieve the goals that we have set for them in the memorandum." And then Iran said, "Well, you're kind of full of shit." And the U.S. said, "Oh, okay, so we'll just start giving you the money." And they've already made payments to them based on this $300 billion, and Iran hasn't done a single thing. In fact, they reclosed the Straits of Hormuz. They now have control of the Strait of Hormuz, which they never have before this kerfuffle started. And as I mentioned, we still have $300 billion to pay them, plus the something like $70 billion to repair the military bases, our military bases overseas that were damaged during the whole thing. And there's a couple of billion dollars that will need to be spent to restock all the armaments and weapons that were used. So we've really taken it, I guess you could say, on the chin.
You could say something else too, but
there was
that.
There was something else that came to mind, but I went.
This is a family show.
Yeah, exactly. On occasion. So, what do you guys think? What do you think about the failure in Iran of the U.S. fails?
To the victor, go the oils.
I see what you did there. Yeah.
Man, I'm worried about it. It really seemed like we were facing down a looming deadline, like close, like, okay, 4 months of war / special military operation, whatever Putin's telling them to call it these days. It's been weeks and months. And when you stop 20% of the world's oil from moving where it needs to go, that's a lot. And we can tolerate some of that for a while, but after a while, it's not funny anymore. And I think it was getting to that point. The things I would see in the media led me to believe that we have this much cushion for all these reserves, but when there's no more cushion, buddy, anyway. It seemed like we were getting to that point, and then we're like, "Oh, hey, we made a deal, memorandum. Everybody said yes, and we're doing this." And then, like 36 hours later, we're bombing Lebanon, I think it was, and supposedly that's part of the deal or potential deal, concepts of a deal. And so then it was all of a sudden we tightened up the Strait of Hormuz again. And now it's sort of restricted, but some are getting through. But it's only going to make things more expensive. And I have enough problems in my life. As bad as things are being run, there's no lines at the gas station yet. I'd like to keep it that way, and it seems like we're endangering that. Trump's only superpower is to fuck things up, family program, and that's the only power. He can't create. He can only threaten to destroy. And then if he doesn't do it, hey, I'm a big hero. I saved the thing I was going to stomp a mud hole in. So I don't like that, and I'm sick of the game. And I think we're just playing with fire. If you think it can't get worse, I remind you, COVID. We created a hell out of nothing, out of nowhere, for ourselves. We created the perfect budding ecosystem for it, and by golly, it flourished. And we can do the same thing again. Devastation on dimensions heretofore unfathomed, and we're just. I don't know why we're flirting with this. I don't know why people let it go on. I wish our Congress would do its job.
Anna, what you got?
When you started this segment and you said we're going to do an update on Iran, I was like, oh, did something change? But seems like not. No, it feels like the war that nobody wanted, and except maybe Netanyahu or maybe some hawks, I guess, who don't like Iran. And we've done everything wrong. And it's kind of one of the few times where it's sort of, I don't know if it's because it's affecting people's, price at the pump or whatever, but it's one of the few times where people have been like, sort of cross politically been like, what are we doing? Why are we still doing it? It seems to have gotten us nothing. And there was no reason to do it, and it got us nothing, and now we're stuck in a quagmire.
Well, none of us has said the word Epstein list so far, so I think there is something to it.
That is true.
Trump did it for a purpose. We just don't know particularly what it is, and it certainly hasn't been any sort of a benefit, other than he gets to run around and say, "Oh, I stopped a war. I made a peace deal. See," and without going into the details of who started the war and the fact that he was that person too. Which is typical. I mean, I do agree with Tom on the point that Trump is so simplistic in his thinking that he can only see the 30 seconds and the 5 feet in front of him, if that. And so he says, we did a thing and we bombed people and then we stopped. So I stopped the war. And he doesn't get that the other side's not interested in his potential understanding. They know they were attacked and they're going to respond. And so they, and then the memorandum, you mentioned Netanyahu. The another thing Trump does is he thinks he speaks for everybody whenever he says anything. So he goes ahead and signs this memorandum with Iran and says, also Israel will stop doing whatever it's doing in Lebanon. And Israel's like, well, you didn't say anything to us. You didn't include us in this conversation, so we don't feel bound by this agreement. So we'll do what we think we want to. And we're going to, if they give us a reason, then we will follow up on it. And we will not do the simple little response. We only do big response.
I'd like to point out that he never seeks a consensus. He never seeks anyone to go along with him, except maybe one crony, like Netanyahu. But he abandoned our allies first and foremost. He jettisoned those things like sandbags on a blimp. He's like, heave those overboard, those stupid allies, and he does these strikes in Venezuela and Iran with no stated goal, no stated no plan. Go bomb stuff. Period. End. The Hegseth the Hegseth way. And he goes and blows stuff up and high fives and waits for the accolades to roll in. And then sometimes you can't do that, buddy. I think he was emboldened by Venezuela, but he never seeks a plan or a goal. He doesn't want to explain to anybody. He commands that you get with him before, during, and after, even as he declares in the same breath that he doesn't need you. He's not built to lead. This is exactly what he always does.
Too true. And speaking of the sort of things he does, that brings up our other failure, most recent failure, which would be the reflecting pool scandal and the farce of it. The minor problem that didn't need to be dealt with in the manner which it was, which he, of course, then did, and then the problems that came up with it, and how he, sees a secret enemy who's out to knife the bottom of the reflecting pool, and the secret Antifa operators wearing scuba gear who went down under the what 6 inches of water and cut up the bottom of the pool. Where 2 weeks ago he was saying, "This stuff I'm putting in is so great, it's so fantastic. It's not like somebody could take a knife and cut it. It's very sturdy stuff." And now it's the peeling. Oh, it must be an enemy operative who is using a knife and cutting it up, and it's like, hey, here we go again. So, where are you on algae?
I mean, I'm pro algae. I did see, somebody said today online somewhere, they said, algae is a really good consumer of CO2 and creator of oxygen. So if nothing else, at least Trump, this is probably the most environmental thing he'll ever do.
So he's an environmentalist now.
Yeah.
He's going green.
Yeah, there you go. That's fantastic.
The whole thing is that. Are you done, Hannah? I didn't want to step on you.
Go.
The whole thing is ridiculous from front to back. None of it makes any sense. It wasn't a problem. He didn't need to do anything. And then the thing he decided to do was paint it blue. What? And then he wanted to drive, what was it, like half a dozen armored SUVs down the stupid thing? This water holding vessel, you're gonna caravan right through it to inspect it. He didn't even get out of the truck. I don't even. Maybe he did. I don't know. But he didn't need to drive on it. I'm fixing it. Wham, wham, wham. I got out my fixing sledgehammer. It doesn't make any sense. It didn't need help. He didn't provide help. He wrote a check to somebody with our money. The minute we put this guy in office, the minute I heard the vote at the beginning of his term, I was like, you guys have put a fox in the henhouse. You've given this guy literally a blank check to the greatest reservoir of money, on this side of the planet.
Yeah.
Whoa, what have we done? And this is it. This
and
ridiculous mismanagement.
And
then,
It was a crony. It was some guy who had done work for him before, and some guy who was just as much of a con artist as he is. And of course, the guy screwed the job up. As you were saying, Trump decided it should be a blue pool instead of a reflecting pool, which is actually what it's called. It's called a reflecting pool. It's supposed to.
Have you seen the guy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've seen the goofy.
If you carved a pimp out of plastic, that's what he would look like. He's a Batman villain. He looks ridiculous. What kind of this? This guy is hell to be around. He's living in his own world. These rich guys, they make their own little universe, and they employ everybody that has to deal with them. So anyway, yeah. I'm just saying. I know the type, and this guy is neon.
Absolutely, and that kind of slides us very nicely into our first segment, which is Fascism Creeps. We're talking about the reflecting pool, and
you thought you were done with the reflecting pool, but oh no, this is an issue issue of such vice we mentioned it twice. The reflecting pool, not only is it just a terrible failure of construction, of leadership, of accountability, it's also a terrible failure because now they've invented this ridiculous idea that it's not Trump's idiotic, bumbling Three Stooges level failure that's caused the reflecting pool to be a catastrophic laughingstock mess. No. This Antifa snuck into the pool and let's say and cut it 350 yards. I think is the last time he upped the number unnecessarily on his already ridiculous kindergarten lie. They with a knife. Specifically, he said a knife. When is the last time you ever cut paint with a knife? What are you talking about? And I don't know if I mentioned this last week. I hope I did. But when it comes to this stupid pool, let me just interject this a moment. I apologize. We'll be back to your regularly scheduled program in a moment. Who puts hydrogen peroxide in a pool? I worked at a pool company. I'm no scientist. I'm no chemist. I'm barely what I am. But I never saw anybody talk about peroxide. It was thousands and thousands of gallons of chlorine. Chlorine. You've heard of chlorine? Common, affordable, in use all day, every day, in millions of pools nationwide. Peroxide? Now, maybe, I don't know. And then I read somewhere else that peroxide, that's what they use to pop paint loose. So, knife or chemical mismanagement? So, sorry, I'm burying
and now
the
he's
taking forever to get there. And so, to perpetuate the lie that vandals did it, they're arresting innocent American citizens at the pool who are going, "Hey, look at this stupid shit!" Boom! They slapping cuffs on people. NBC reports that at least 5 people were arrested as of a couple of days ago. I haven't checked recently, but I'm pretty sure I've seen more in the headlines. They're wrapping people up on the obvious bald-faced lie that we can all see that people are harming people, not the president, are harming this reflecting pool.
right, and we'll update the.
That's what makes it fascism.
Yeah,
I finally got there.
there you go, and we can change the scene as well. Yeah, it's this whole nonsense of announcing that there's this enemy, this imagined enemy, and then coming up with some sort of a fictional crime, and then trying to use that to take it out on everybody else, right? So anybody who's near the pool now is now an operative who's trying to pursue this, I guess, assault on the paint. Is that the charge? I have no idea. Hannah, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's we'll get to some of this failure, other things that Trump tried to do and failed in a little bit, but I just feel like, yeah, it seems like very classic, like dictator, authoritarian, like, you all messed it up, you're sabotaging, you're going in there with a knife and cutting it up. Or I think somebody was like that, somebody must have developed some kind of super algae. Um, and it's not too dissimilar from them like putting up the tent around when the letters came down off the Kennedy Center and whatever. It's just like classic dictator authoritarian move. They cannot handle their own failure. And so they must come up with these stupid reasons why it must be everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, exactly, and then once he makes this delusional sort of excuse, really, as to being some sort of imaginary enemy, of course, everybody then fits that profile, right? And
Bald-faced farcical. How much longer are we going to tolerate this? It's ridiculous.
well,
And
I mean, that's that
it's
clearly
obviously, sorry, the
clearly
matters of,
long enough.
yeah, the matters of scale are obviously different, but it's not really too dissimilar from what's happening in Iran. He came up with an idea. He thought it would make him look awesome, and it flopped because he
You
put
botched
no.
the shit out of it.
Yeah, you actually have to plan things like this and
Uh-huh.
like think about them.
Form
Which is kind of why
coalition.
the government spends a lot of money, because it makes plans so that it doesn't have massive failures like this. Um, and he's not a big planner, which is why he's failed his way to the top.
Well, and a spoiled brat. He wants to do something, so he does it, and everybody else can worry about the consequences. And he did his little thing, so he can get his little trophy or whatever it is, or imaginary trophy. Even I expect he has many more of those than any other kind of trophy. And it's all everybody else's problem, right? So invade Iran and then say you won. give them 30 or give them $300 billion, and say clearly they it was an unconditional surrender. That it all works out for him. Now, another one of those things was, of course, the dealing with the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, and he didn't like Tim Walz, so all of a sudden DOJ comes up with these half dozen grand jury subpoenas targeting Walz, and a judge kind of looked into it and said, "Yeah, you know what? None of this has a real basis. This is nonsense." And all of them have been dismissed by the district judge. And then, of course, with the district judges, we've heard stories of dozens of district judges overturning these silly nonsense decisions. And now the Supreme Court is saying that they're going to limit district judges to only having an effect on a specific designated region or area, and that their rulings are not going to automatically be applied nationally anymore. So even the his picked Supreme Court is trying to do something to temper the fact that the district judges are responding and are a real resistance. Now, there's also the veteran federal prosecutor who's having 20 years of cases looked into. The Assistant U.S. Attorney Sherry Mecklenburg, one of the prosecutors on the Broadview 6 case, which was thrown out in May for flagrant misconduct, including jury tampering, is having her cases back to 2007 be reevaluated by her boss, who's trying to show he wasn't involved in all of this. And at least one case from 2018 has already been dismissed. What do you think about Mecklenburg and the review of work?
Yeah, so I mean, again, not too dissimilar from the reflecting pool. I said that we would reference this earlier. So the Broadview 8 are this group of people, sorry, Broadview 6, are this group of people just out of Chicago who were arrested for protesting outside of a ICE detention camp. And it was one of those things that people thought was probably political, and then right as the case was about to start, these people came and they're just like, it clearly was political. They had one of the people on the prosecution had been talking to one of the grand jury members like privately, and all these other things to try and influence the grand jury to vote to have the case go forward. And so it got dismissed with prejudice, which means they cannot bring it back again. And so this guy Botros, who's the district attorney there, he's getting a lot of flack about like, how did you do this? How have you let this go, get this far away from you and whatever. So I think in a way of like trying to, so in two different things. In one way, he's trying to cover his ass and just go after Mecklenburg and some other people. And then the other thing is a lot of the people who were arrested were lawyers or politicians, so they know what they're doing, and so they are pushing anybody who's anyway related to this. They're going to push back against them and try and bring this up. So I don't want to insinuate that Mecklenburg is some sort of patsy. Obviously she did do these things and whatever, but I feel like it wouldn't surprise me if Botros falls from this too, and maybe some other people, and rightly so. If you are willing to do the president's bidding for a show trial, you've probably been having some issues of stuff, and it's good for me if all these people go down in flames.
Tom, anything on Mecklenburg, or we're moving on?
I just want to point out that some of the things she's suspected of is allegedly dismissing grand jurors who are skeptical of the government's case and had private conversations with grand jurors outside formal proceedings. That alone is terrible. It's terrible. It's terrible. That's all.
We are moving on to our next and perhaps last issue in the Fascism Creeps section, which is there's word that the UK police, the United Kingdom's police, are increasing use of facial recognition technology, but there are some that are starting to feel that it's not an appropriate tool or not used appropriately. The Essex police, if you're familiar with the geography of the UK, have paused their facial recognition camera use after studies found that there was racial bias in how they detect the software detects who is potentially a criminal. And hey, we're back to what's the thing with the bumps on the head? The British
Phrenology.
do phrenology. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're back to phrenology practically, where a thing that is supposed to be scientific in its basis is actually,
Hooey.
doesn't work the way it's imagined it could. It's nice that you can imagine it, but that doesn't make it true. Anything on Neil Gray?
Um. Oh. I don't know about that. But basically, the Scottish government, which is, often they don't want to be part of the UK. They recently had an election to leave, but they ended up not. Um, so the cabinet secretary for justice, who must be up there in Scotland, um, is basically saying we're going to watch how this goes for Westminster, and then figure out how we're going to do it here. But yeah, Matt, to one of your points, in one of these articles, they said that, or not article, I guess they said in the article too, but the people from the Metro Police said that they were going to start with this facial recognition in high crime areas. And that's just like, it's basically just redoubling down on, racial profiling. If you put a lot of police or cameras in, poor neighborhoods, or neighborhoods of people of color, because you think that's where crime is. Of course, you're going to catch crime because that's where you're looking. Um, and so it's all these things are just basically making, if there's already racism in the system, then it's just going to turbocharge all that because the system that you're using of policing is already broken.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, they caught Jack the Ripper, right? Oh no, sorry. There's so yeah, yeah. No, your point is absolutely true, and I agree with that. Let's move on to our next issue, which we call Tuck, Tail, and Run. There he is. There's some time to have a little chat about Tucker Carlson and what's going there. So, a conservative and someone who tried to make himself sort of an archetypal conservative. I mean, guy wore a bow tie for decades. Here's a guy who's very dedicated to being a conservative, by God. And, being from a wealthy family, it all adds up. But now he says he can no longer support the Republicans. And
He's the Malcolm X of American conservatives.
exactly. And so his big announcement recently is that he can no longer support the Republicans because the Republicans support Israel, and it's not acceptable to him, and he's out of there, baby. And yet he still sucks. Go figure. This is the issue that seems to be dividing the conservatives, and this at this point in history seems to be a group of conservatives who are saying we support Israel, and okay, that's great, and another group that says Republicans support Israel, and therefore it's no longer acceptable. He was Tucker Carlson was joined by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who left the Congress and now the Republican Party. She said they were now America last. They were no longer the Party of America first. They're the Party of America last, and that's because and she specifically noted their support for Israel as her concern. So, what do you got? What do you think about Tucker Carlson? Well, he's going to tuck his tail and run from the state of Israel.
I mean, Carlson, he was born into a news family, right? His father was a newsman who also was terrible. And he was also born into the Swanson family, frozen dinner family.
Would you say the horse apple didn't fall far from the tree?
That's right. But I mean, like, he started on MSNBC, and then he was on CNN, and he was on Crossfire trying to have it be this, I don't know, this like conservative and liberal, people debating stuff. Um, and then that failed spectacularly. And then he went to Fox News, then he was kicked out of Fox News. And so, like, he's, and he got his job, if I remember correctly, um, because somebody needed an expert in something, and he just agreed to do it, even though he wasn't an expert in that thing. Um, and so he's definitely the kind of person who is, he might be America last, but he's definitely Tucker first. Um, and he's definitely happy to change his spots or his stripes to whoever will listen to him. And I feel like he's this idea of he can't support Republicans anymore because of what's happening in Israel, I feel like is the kind of sentence you put together, hoping that people will not look too deeply into that. There's lots of criticisms about Netanyahu. We had criticisms about Netanyahu, but I feel like saying not supporting Israel, okay, this could go bad ways, but it is definitely something that you can not support Israel and not be anti-Semitic, but you can also dog whistle to anti-Semites. Um, and to think that there's not a ton of anti-Semites within the Republican Party, of course there are, and so they're going to appeal to those people. But he's using it in this way to, I'm sure, hopefully think maybe he can get some progressives who, are anti-Semitic as well, or just really anti-Netanyahu or whatever. But I feel like he's the kind of guy he's never really done anything to help anybody but himself. And so, if there's going to be any kind of change in him, that's where it has to start.
I think that. Tom, you got anything on Tucker?
Regarding Tucker Carlson, he's awful, and he will remain to be awful. I would like to point out and express gratitude for Jon Stewart going on to his Crossfire TV show on CNN and just taking his bicycle apart on national television, just reducing him to constituent parts and breaking down his whole shilly game. It was a thing of beauty, and we need more people like that and more things like that in the world. I get the sense that Tucker Carlson is just a rat leaving a sinking ship. The man has never been guided by principles. He sure hasn't started now. I don't watch Tucker that much, much like any other right-leaning celebrities or figures or quote-unquote public servants. What a quaint term. I don't watch them. I can't stand to watch them. It's awful. It's looking like it's like watching a car crash with vomit on it, just on a nonstop loop. It makes me sick to my stomach, and I've stopped watching conservative. I don't track any of that popular culture for my health because I'm sick of the whole damn thing. And wake me when it's over. I want to go into a cryostasis. And so I don't know where Tucker's going. I don't care. I hope he goes and never comes back. Mazel tov, Tucker. Goodbye.
I honestly think that this is all early image shaping for the next Republican presidential campaign. I think that he's testing an issue, and that he wants to see who will agree, who will disagree, and he's doing that in part to maybe guide one of the particular leading candidates, so-called leading candidates, in this case J.D. Vance, to see if an issue that he's kind of toying with is one that can pick up some popular support. And that you're right, Tucker Carlson himself doesn't really give a, he's not concerned with the public image. He's concerned with testing Republican and conservative messaging, and he's happy to do that. And this is a guy who was part of that Fox, although he had been on MSNBC even at one point. What he wound up as was a Fox News lackey, and he was part of that team that was able to incur the $787 billion pay out demanded by the court because Fox News had lied, and he was one of them. And the emails from the inside showed that he was touting Trump and all the nonsense that Trump was talking about elections and whatever. And yet behind the scenes, he was saying, "Oh, this guy's a nut bag. Trump is a lunatic. This is a guy who clearly nobody needs to pay attention to." Oh, but on air, he was there. Oh, yeah, Trump's a great guy. He knows what he's talking about. So it helped to provide the basis for the court's decision. But we will find out more about that in the coming months, certainly, as November rears into the popular front view. Speaking of the November election and it's being something that is now hashed out with primaries across the country that are happening here and there over certain weeks, we should maybe turn our eyes to Election Central. And if we do look at Election Central, we can look at, among other things, there's the Alaska Senate race that's facing a legal challenge days before the ballot is required to be printed. Now they're supposed to print the ballots in Alaska this Sunday, but there's a Senate incumbent by the name of Daniel S. Sullivan. And Daniel S. Sullivan and his campaign and the Republicans' national campaign for senators said that there was another candidate who had to be removed from the ballot, and that was a fellow by the name of Daniel J. Sullivan. They said that this was a sham candidate who the Democrats were putting forward, although Daniel J. Sullivan said he just filled out the paperwork that the Elections Board required. He put his full name, Daniel J. Sullivan. He selected his party affiliation, which is Republican, and that he claims he's not talked with the Democrats and had nothing to do with them. And in fact, the Democrats also say, we haven't spoken to this guy. He's not in any way connected with us. But the Republicans don't really, and especially in a place like Alaska, don't need to be concerned with what is fact and what's fiction. They can say whatever they want. And in fact, they do. And this time around, it was Daniel J. Sullivan has to go. He's got to be removed. And there's absolutely no evidence for their doing this. And so Danny J's attorney has filed a suit to get him back on the ballot. And yet all of this has to happen now, as I said, this week. It's all got to come to a head because they need to print those ballots unless they get some injunction that prevents the ballots from being printed up. And what's that going to do to the elections? We'll see. We'll see exactly how they handle it. Oh, it should be noted that Daniel S. Sullivan, who's the incumbent senator, is not only designated on the ballots as a Republican, but also as the incumbent. So if the Republicans feel that their voters are not capable of understanding the difference between something that says Daniel S. Sullivan, Republican incumbent, and Daniel J. Sullivan, Republican, I think they need to have a talk with their supporters. They need to have a talk with the voters in Alaska and say, look, we don't trust you to comprehend this. And so therefore we demand that someone be removed from the ballot because we say so. In other election news, you may have heard about things going on in New York. One thing was the sort of the race that there were several races that got attention, one of which was the comptroller's race. Now, this is the guy who looks after the pension money and invests it for state employees, and also has a lot to do with what does and doesn't happen with that money. Which particular industries are going to be picked up on as mutual funds to be invested in, and what yields money so that there's money in the pension fund, and also has a say in state and city government when they spend money as to, is this legitimate? Is it illegitimate? What's the problem? How do we start or stop something that's happened? And the guy who's been doing it for the past 20 years is a guy named Tom DiNapoli. And this cycle is the first time that he's had opponents. There were several people who stood up and said, look, this guy has some things that he's done that aren't particularly reputable or certainly should have an effect on his reputation. Of course, he himself says, well, I stood up to Trump. I stood up to Musk. I do all sorts of good things. And the opponents were saying, well, let's take a little bit of a quicker look at a more in-depth look at what's going on. They were Drew Warsaw and Raj Goyal, both of whom were running to the left of DiNapoli, which some say is the problem, or is certainly one of the problems in the race, was that both of them were on the left side, so they drew from the same base of voters. They wouldn't be able to out uh, 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 out. They wouldn't be able to get enough votes to take the election away from DiNapoli. And in fact, that is what happened. I don't know that they shared necessarily all the same voters, but the bottom line is DiNapoli wound up with more votes. So he's moving on to the election in November as the incumbent controller. Hannah, what do you think about the comptroller's race and what happened? Oh, can't hear you.
Oh, that's why you don't mute yourself. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to. We're going to get to this a little bit later, but there has been a lot of quite progressive Democrats winning lots of elections. But it seems like not this case. I don't know if it's meaningful. It's meaningful. It's notable, I guess, that he was primaried from the left. We will see what becomes of that, if that will have more, primary challengers and sort of comfortable seats. But I don't want to jump on too many more things ahead, but I saw today that sort of the more comfortably Democratic seats are tending to go a little bit more left, and some of the more seats that could go either way are still sort of appealing to moderates.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That particularly the congressional races, and maybe even some of the local races, did tend to the left. Matter of fact, all three of the congressional candidates that Mayor Mondami endorsed won their races. So Claire Valdez over in the 7th, and Davila Chevalier up in, what was that, the 17th maybe, and Brad Lander, who ran in the 10th, has taken out Goldman, Daniel Goldman, who, if memory serves, last election, Goldman sort of parachuted in from the establishment and took the 10th from the liberal who was running, right? The more progressive candidate who was running looked like she had a clear shot. And then all of a sudden, this establishment guy, Goldman, shows up, and people were like, in political circles and local political circles, were kind of like, okay, who is he? I don't know what's happening here. But he had backing from DC and some top officials in the party, and all of a sudden he won. And now that's been done to him because Brad Lander did not give him an inch. He was out there consistently challenging him and bringing up that he was trying to buy the election with his own money, and this is supposed to be about the people. And Brad Lander won handily. He got 2/3 of the vote over Goldman.
It should be noted that Lander has a lot of political history here in New York, and he's pretty well liked.
In political circles, maybe not so much liked, but definitely liked by the voters, and that's
yes.
the point. He wasn't liked enough to win the mayor's election. That went to Mondami. But even in that loss for the mayor, Lander was very open about a cross endorsement of Mondami, and helping the team sort of to get across the line, so to speak. So he does have a lot of credibility. Certainly has always been a favorite of progressives in New York when he was comptroller, and before that when he was on the city council because of the things he did
Yeah.
with housing and other issues. He really gained credibility because of what he did. Um, I will say for the Clara Valdez win over in seventh, there were the candidate came in second. It's a guy by the name of Antonio Reynoso, who is currently he ran for Congress, but he's currently the Brooklyn Borough president. And I'll be honest, I don't have I can't say enough about Anthony Reynoso. I think he was so credible and so positive that I am kind of not clear how that wound up happening, other than with elections, there's sort of a thing that happens that you really can't put your finger on until after the election, and you can always go back and say, oh well, this is what happened. But during the cycle, you can't really see it clearly. And whatever that thing was, it was favoring Democratic Socialist candidates, certainly on the congressional level. Um, Tom, anything about New York that you want to throw in?
Nothing to add.
All right. And I'll take just a couple of seconds, maybe a whole minute, to throw some other news about elections at you. June 28th, the Michigan Libertarians have their state convention. I've never been clear on who's an authority there and how do they govern the whole convention, but it's happening again. And June 30th, in Alaska's Gateway School District, there's a recall election for seat C, held by Lisa Conrad. The Alaska is one of those states that does allow for recall elections of elected officials. They have a threshold of getting 25% of the total vote from the previous election. If you get that number of signatures on a petition saying you want to recall, then you get a recall. Although they also, while other states don't necessarily have any sort of standard, Alaska is one of those states who say you have to charge them with some kind of misconduct or illegal activity if you want to have a recall. And in this case, there was a complaint that Conrad had not followed the bylaw or policies for running a censure vote in February of 2025, and that was good enough. It's Alaska voters. Your turn to vote on it is June 30th. You make the decision. And also on June 30th, a special primary runoff for Arkansas's House of Representatives District 44, which contains part of Pope and Van Buren counties. The incumbent passed away, and there are actually going to be two elections. This is sort of the thing that caught my eye, that they're having the election to replace the incumbent for the rest of his term, which is between now and November. And at the same time, they're running an election for who will replace him in November. The Republican who's already sort of clinched the seat, so to speak, because there's nobody running against him for the November race, is, of course, running in the filler seat race. But he does have competition there. So it will be interesting to see whether or not it's gerrymandered enough so that he takes both of those elections, or if somebody else is able to take the filler seat between now and November. There were, of course, you may be familiar with Nancy Mace. That's a name that might ring a bell, a Republican from South Carolina, the Congressional District 1 race. She retired but ran in this election. But Jenny Honeycutt is the person who will run as a Republican, according to the election results. And the Democrats have a former Rear Admiral, Nancy LaCour, who was booted out of service by Pete Hegseth, allegedly for being a woman. I'm not really sure what the charge was that he was using, but he was able to do that. And now she could be the next congressperson from South Carolina. We'll see on Election Day. There's I mentioned the New York 10th seat. Wait a minute. I did this. This is one of the ones I didn't actually. The New York 10th, which Jerry Nadler, who's top Democratic leadership on the Congress, he has retired, and there were a dozen or so people. There was a Kennedy descendant, Jack Schlossenberg, and newly minted Democrat George Conway. You might recognize that name. They were in the field, but in the end, Mika Lasher, who's an assembly member and had support from Governor Hochul, won the Democratic nomination. We'll see what happens in November. Utah voters did exactly what you would expect Utah voters to do. Maryland's 6th congressional district, where there was the retirement of Steny Hoyer, one of the top leaders in the House. He retired, and there'll be a new champion, Adrian Bofa. And that was out of a field of 23 people. That was a busy race to replace Steny, because you don't get a lot of top officials retiring, and certainly not in Maryland. So when there's an open seat, everybody's interested. We are going to move on to our next segment, which is the issue update. And when we move on to the issue update, you'll notice that the first thing we'll talk about is the United Kingdom's Prime Minister resigning. Keir Starmer, after some really, frankly, designating losses in recent elections for the Labour Party. Remember, it's a parliamentary system, so the leader of the party is the person who's prime minister. So when the party starts losing a lot, sometimes they get rid of their leader and they replace them. In this case, among other things, the recent election on the local level in the UK, the Labour Party lost 1,600 seats across the country, and so there were a lot of people who started resigning from his cabinet, and one even said that they would challenge him if nobody else does. A guy named Wes Streeting, and another person whose name came up was Andy Burnham, who was mayor up in Manchester, had been an MP previously, but was not at the time, and people said, well, if you're going to be prime minister, you have to be an MP. So Andy Burnham went out and got a race to run in, the Mayfield race, by-election, and he won the seat and won it handily. Now, what's interesting is that's a constituency that was said to be kind of conservative, that the voters in it were kind of conservative, and before the election, people were saying, well, you know what, maybe Burnham won't even make it. There's been this wave of supporting the Reform Party and the Green Party and turning away from Labor, so he may not even win. And then the election happened, and he won. He won big. It was one of those 60% sort of elections. He won handily. The Reform candidate was at 30, 32, something like that percent. He just wiped the floor with the guy. And all the other candidates, the one who was wearing the big cowboy hat and the one who's called Count Binface, all the extra candidates, or let's say extreme candidates. But what that meant was Burnham became an MP, and almost overnight, Keir Starmer said, "Yeah, I'm resigning. If Burnham's going to challenge me, I'm gonna hit the high road." And then all of a sudden, Wes Streeting, who had said that he would run for prime minister, all of a sudden said, "You know what? As long as Keir's out, I'm good. I'll back Burnham." And he came out and announced his support for Burnham. So it does look like that is exactly what's going to happen. What we need to see, I think, will be if Burnham actually follows through on things. Keir Starmer, one of the things was he didn't want to be known as a fancy guy who is getting attention. He just wants to do the hard work because he's a hard worker. And then he really didn't follow through on issues for the people and started taking on sort of that Tony Blair right wing sort of thing. And it just didn't work. And it didn't help the people. And they let him know. Okay, anything else you guys, any thoughts on the UK and Prime Minister and all of that?
Not really. I'm glad that Starmer's out. I feel like he's spineless.
Yeah, I think the actions speak for themselves. Yeah, and it also allowed for it sort of cleared a path for the rise of the Reform Party that hadn't even existed a few years ago, so they don't have seats to lose. Now they do. Now they got plenty of, say, 1,200 council seats, and it looks like they'll be taken as a credible threat in the next election for what leads to the prime minister. Okay, one other failure we should mention is in the issue update is an issue we've talked about once or twice, and that's Elon Musk. And although he may be a trillionaire, he's not. He's certainly willing to do it. Well, not. How is he not a trillionaire?
Because SpaceX has lost almost everything they gained since their IPO.
Yeah, like 40 billion. He's back down to 957 billion, I think. I read.
Yeah, and people are expecting it to keep dropping. So apparently they have to. Apparently they have to show their profits here coming up, and at that point, the people who were like internal who had stock can sell out, and so some of them might be cashing out, which is what I would do if I worked there.
The poor guy's really taking it on the chin.
Yeah,
I mean,
he'll have to go back to the emerald mines.
Exactly. He'll have to go back to trying to destroy democracy. Okay, let's move along here. We've covered the issue update, I believe, and we are going to turn our eyes to A Reason to Hope. Now, there's a comedian by the name of Nate Bargatze, and you may know the name, you may not, but he decided that he would enjoy being a part of the whole playtime show thing that happened in front of the White House with the UFC wrestlers who came out and did their show, and he wanted to be a part of it, and he just wanted to do his comedy, and so he performed for the Trump birthday party. And since he has, things have not been going so well for Nate Bargatze, and it may not all be just due to his comedic content. I don't happen to have Bill Burr's phone number, so I don't think we can get him in on the conversation. But Tom, what do you think?
I haven't seen a lot of I think it's Bargatze. I'm not sure. Nate Bargatze's comedy. I've read about it. People say it was friendly and approachable, and he was sort of a middle of the road guy and nice guy. And then he went to the UFC event and took photos with like Bobby Kennedy Jr. and I don't know, maybe Trump, whoever, just a bunch of people there who are right-wing chuds, and people apparently that clashed with what people thought of him. And he's also coming off a couple of losses. He had kind of a big 6 months ago. He had kind of a moment. He had a movie coming out, and then the movie didn't do too well. I think it was a movie. He had a big media thing. It was like one of those kind of a big break from where he was. It was like a step up and then right back down. I guess it didn't go that well. And then it wasn't helped by this because I think people looked at him and his comedy and didn't think of him as a Trump guy, a UFC Dana White guy, right-wing guy. And so, yeah, he's taken a lot of heat for it. And yeah, Bill Burr is he can probably relate. Bill Burr, of course, attended that comedy show in Saudi Arabia, I think it was, and they still call him Bonesaw Billy and a lot of other imaginative nicknames. His social media is infested like with bed bugs, except it's people just raking him over the coals for going over to Saudi Arabia, and people started dragging him. He said it can't be, it's normal. It's like they got chilies over there and stuff, and that did not help at all. It wasn't that funny, and so now they're beating him over the head with that too. So, yeah,
I'll
I'm sorry the culture is polarized. I didn't make it that way.
I will add about Bill Burr. First of all, I think he's funny. I think he's shown that he's got talent, and he's
sure.
he's
Agreed.
been in more than just comedy. He's been in a number of TV shows, but I think part of it was that he had been so publicly involved with saying, "Don't mix politics and comedy. Never go. Don't you can make a joke or two about it, but don't get involved in politics and kind of stay away from it, or do both sides when you do comedy about
Well,
politics. You got to do
and
both sides."
he also railed
And
against the ultra wealthy and the oligarchs and things like that, and seemed to be a man of the people, except when there's a big check on the line. I also like Bill Burr's comedy. I think he's funny. I think he's smart and interesting. He acts, which is fine. I don't watch most of the stuff he's in just because he acts in stuff that I don't always. I'm not a big Star Trek fan. Excuse me, Star Wars fan anymore. I don't really keep up, but what a great get for a guy who's not even an actor to start acting and get into a series like that. Good, good for him, I guess. That's fine. I don't dislike him, but I don't like what he did, and I think it's instructive. Think about it.
yeah, I think you got a point there, and I will say it certainly proves you're not a Star Wars fan when you mistake it with Star Trek.
Ugh,
There's gonna be letters, man.
I'm gonna take heat.
Hannah, anything on Nate or Bill or?
No, I'd never heard of Nate Bargatze before. This all blew up, and I know of Bill Burr. I don't know if I've watched anything he's like any of his comedy specials or whatever. But there's comedians I like him, so that seems like a nice uh check mark on his way. Endorsement.
Let me ask this: do you happen to know anything about the affordability bill that was passed by the Senate?
The Senate passed an affordability bill, which is, it's great. It was, I think it was bipartisan, but I think the original sponsor was a Democrat. Um, but it's all the kinds of thing. It's a lot of housing kinds of stuff. So boost the housing supply, home ownership, um, these kinds of things. A lot of the stuff that we are, will hopefully alleviate some of the things we're seeing. I mean, obviously, there's no accounting for whatever's happening with gas and whatever, but even outside of what's happening politically, well, not politically, but like with Trump and whatever, there has been a lot of affordability has been a difficult thing, and it's nice for these people to come together, Republicans, Democrats. I guess the leaders, there was 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, to pass it, and the White House has already announced support of the final version. So hopefully, also one of the big things is it prevents Wall Street from buying up a bunch of private property for investment, which I think is great. And so, hopefully that will give some relief to people.
Right. And we mentioned before how Trump winds up taking both sides of every issue. A couple of weeks ago, he was saying affordability was a Democratic hoax, and now he's talking about signing the affordability bill. Speaking of the Republicans in the Senate, we should mention that there's been, and specifically in the section "Reason to Hope," it's worth noting that some of the Republican senators are now not so happy with Donald Trump and willing to actually say things in public. This is a big move because up to now it's all been do whatever he says and maybe behind the scenes complain and maybe mean it, maybe not mean it, but you want to complain in the back room because you want to be seen as not agreeing with this guy, but you do vote and support every single thing he does ever. And some of them are starting to say, well, maybe he's crossed a line or two. Now, that may be because of the Senate race down in Texas recently, where Trump supported Ken Paxton. He was a state official in Texas, best known for his wife divorcing him because of some shenanigans he had been involved with. And this was Trump's guy. I mean, of course, who else is Trump going to be more fervent in his support for than someone who cheats on his wife? However, the opponent or the guy that lost in the Senate race because of Paxton is a guy named John Cronin, who had been a leader in the Senate. And it's not very common that you challenge your own party's leader in the Senate. But here you go. The Republicans do that sort of thing. And Cronin uh, was touting how he had something like a 98% or 99% voting record with Trump, and yet Trump undermined him and backed his opponent, which we mentioned this before, even earlier in this show. Trump winds up, if you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, or you blink at the wrong time in the photo, or whatever it is he doesn't like, then he goes after you as hard as anybody else. And Cronin learned that and lost his seat. So on his way out, Cronin said, "Hey, by the way, it's a tradition that the loser in the primary backs the winner in their party, whoever it is, and I ain't doing that. I'm not going to give a single dime of my campaign money to Paxton, and I'm not going to support him in any way. And in fact, I'm going to send all my money to other candidates in other states before helping that guy out." So there's a very big and very public break. And the senators who are still there are starting to do it too. The Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, apparently in a big lunch meeting where Trump met with the senators because he's been causing trouble for the Senate, Republicans. And Bill Cassidy stood up and started arguing with him about the Iran war, saying that it was a bad idea. He said it was the whole thing about getting money to J6ers was outrageous because some of the J6ers had killed police, and Cassidy didn't want to be associated with that. So he was not only objecting, but to Trump's face, finally. Some others who have done that, of course, usually wait until they're attacked by Trump and pushed out of office. But this guy's taken it to the next step where he's actually saying it before getting pushed out of office by Trump, or one would assume that's the next thing to happen. Either of you have anything to add on the senators before we wrap things up?
Nope. Not here.
Fair enough. That brings us to our Epstein count up. And earlier it was mentioned that all of these things that are happening, and the birthday party and the this and the that, all sort of distract from certain other issues, one of which is, of course, the Epstein list. It's not being talked about many places as much as it used to be. And although it's not going to go away fully, I don't think, there's a lot of even Republicans who are starting to come on board and be absolutely disgusted by the pedophiles who were involved in the Epstein files and the actions on the island and elsewhere. And so it won't go away, but people are certainly not focused on it like they used to be. And to point that out, we have a count up as to how many days the unredacted Epstein list has not been released. Today we're on day 4026. Mark it down in your calendar. Get ready for next week's count up, because it sure ain't getting wrapped up between now and then. Thanks for joining us at PolitiPod Live for Political Talk. You're welcome to join us every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here for PolitiPod Live. And if you want a political laugh, stay tuned. There's going to be a new episode of PolitiPod out in a week or so. And it's a half dozen of our friends who have a political comedy podcast called PolitiPod. You'll find it at soundcloud.com/PolitiPod.
This is Tom Bickle.
This is Hannah Soldner.
And I'm Matt Nisanoff. Goodbye.